Welcome back everyone to the weekly Mailbox, your chance to ask me questions about absolutely anything you would like. Formula 1, Formula E, American racing, anything you want really, and your chance to do that every single week in the comment section down below on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. But today's going to be a little bit different. As you all know, the world of Formula 1 has been turned on its head in light of recent global events, and whilst I would rather not focus too much on that aspect of Formula 1 at the moment, it's going to be inevitable. And I have seen over the last few days, while I had a little bit of a break just to kind of work out what I was going to do going forward, there's quite a few questions, quite a few things left up in the air, not only by F1, but also myself. So for starters, this week, I just wanted to do a slight caveat that there are some questions about the ongoing dramas in the world, and if you're a little bit like me and at the moment would rather avoid that kind of thing, I totally get it. Do not worry. I'm hoping next week things will be back to normal, more straightforward questions, but inevitably the questions this week, some of them are based around that. But what I want to start with this week is a question from George Tanner, and it's something that a few people have been asking me about on social media over the past few days, and I put a post out on my community feed on YouTube, and also, did I do it? Yeah, on Twitter and Instagram as well. Yeah, I try my best to keep you all informed. I'm not great at those kind of things. But George asks, how many videos will there be per week? I'm going to elaborate a little bit further on this question. What are my plans? A little bit of a mini channel update, if you will. So, obviously, I cannot commentate on what's going on at race weekends because at the moment, and rightly so, we don't have race weekends. So I can't do race previews, I can't do practice reports, quality reviews, race reviews, and I was going to bring back this season as well, winners and losers. It's something I did at the beginning of last year. A lot of you really enjoyed that series, so I thought I'd bring it back. And I probably will when we get back to racing, but obviously at the moment, that's not a possibility. So what am I going to be doing? Mailbox is going to stay. Of course it's going to stay. And I'm going to try and tailor that a little bit more towards what I'm doing right now. A little bit more informal. You know, try and have a bit of a chat with you guys. Go down in the comments afterwards. And we can make the Mailbox our hub for just messing around, really. Just having that one-to-one talk. Pretty straightforward. So that's really what the Mailbox is going to be. And thinking about it, not a fat lot different to what we had before. But obviously normal content. Over the winter, I was really trying to help look forward to the new season, and I'm still going to do that. I've had to postpone my 2020 beginner's guide, and I'm going to tweak that a little bit over the next few weeks. Really try and make it a bit more streamlined, the current situation. So I will look at changing that and bringing that out as soon as possible. But obviously, there's going to have to be some new series implemented, and last year, as well as race content, I did mini-series such as the Future Drivers. I can't remember quite what I called it. The Driver Academy series. So I looked at Formula 2, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, all their young driver programs. I'm not going to do that again at the moment. Anyway, I might do a little bit down the line. But my initial thoughts, I'm going to be doing a kind of Formula 1 driver's journey to F1. I'm currently in the building process of that series. Likewise with a Legends of Formula 1 series. I'm looking at some kind of Grand Prix history series. So I might look at the Portuguese Grand Prix history, the Indian Grand Prix history, first race, last race, what I think went wrong, was the circuit good, was it not so good? Looking at those kind of things and trying to help some of you, like I have tried in the past, to learn a little bit more about F1. So I definitely think a more historical approach is going to have to come into play this year. But also, something I've been playing around with a little bit is a little bit of live streaming. And I haven't completely fully decided where I'm going to go with that, whether it's going to be some kind of, like I am right now, sitting down chatting, maybe a bit of gaming. Not too sure just yet. I know eSports is a topic we're going to talk about a little bit later on today, but maybe, I don't know, some F1 online lobbies, getting you guys involved. I can sit here, answer some questions, a Mailbox live kind of thing. And I'm also considering doing a few charity streams, something like that. Trying to mix it up a little bit more fun, potentially. this year. So don't worry, there will be videos, and off the top of my head, I'm thinking 3 a week, maybe more if I get bored, which is very likely. I've not got a fat lot else to do at the moment, so we'll see. But I wanted to quickly start off with this question because if you've got any thoughts, anything you would in particular like to see, throw it down in the comment section below, because at the moment, anything goes. And whilst I'm going to try and keep things as normal as possible, there will have to be some changes. So if you really didn't care about what I've just said, apologies. We'll get into the questions now. But for the rest of you that have been a part of the team for the while, thanks for sticking by me. And we can get through this together, I would like to think. But our first real question number 2, comes from Tate Evans. And it's about C19. Do you think that if the C19 situation stays very serious for a long while, the FIA could just cancel this season and move to 2021 regulations and skip 2020 as a whole? Or alternatively, could the FIA decide to push the 2021 regulations back a year and run the 2020 season in 2021? I've got to start with this question because this is the big one. When is Formula 1 going to return? Are we going to be racing this year? The honest answer is we really don't know. The plans at the moment are a little bit all over the place. Currently, the first 4 races are either cancelled or postponed. So officially, we are starting in Holland, in the Netherlands, and for very unlikely that's going to happen. So Ross Brawn and some of the other leaders in the Formula 1 group are suggesting we're going to start the season at the end of May, which could mean we have a Monaco or Azerbaijan start. Obviously, we don't know, and we don't know how the situation with the C19 virus is going to continue. Is it going to be a couple of months? Is it going to be a year? We really don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions at the moment, and sadly, I'm not an expert on biology and anything like that. I'm not a healthcare expert anyways. So my gut feeling is right now that the current 2020 season, if we start racing after the summer break, August, we will stick with the 2020 cars, drivers, and the circuits we go to and the calendar will be a bit of a mismatch because we can definitely skip the summer break. That's definitely something that Formula 1 are looking at. They are looking at potentially doing a few double headers. Next question, I'll focus on that a little bit more. But the calendar itself can be moved and shaped a little bit. You know, people that are looking and hoping that we could have an Australian Grand Prix at some other point this year, I would say that's unlikely due to the fact in our summer, the European summer, British summer, if we have an Australian Grand Prix then, that's the middle of the Australian winter. And you can't just suddenly go racing in the middle of the snow. Do they have snow in Australia? That's very bad knowledge of me. Maybe some places. I'd love to know if you're from Australia, and I would really appreciate if you made me not look stupid. That would be very much appreciated. But also, you can't suddenly just block off public roads without any serious forward planning. I'm guessing natives of Melbourne and Australia know that every time we get to March or April, whenever the Australian Grand Prix falls early on in the year, those roads are going to be closed. Albert Park sections are going to be closed off for the race. You can't just suddenly decide, oh yeah, in next month we're going to suddenly do that, because that messes up far more things than I care to think about. Even silly little things like marathons. I know in the grand scheme of things it's not a big deal, but you can't just suddenly show up to somewhere and say we're racing. That's not viable. I think I explained that okay there. So the calendar, we need 8 races for it to be classed as a world championship. I think there will be 8 races. Will Formula 1 push it back a year? I think potentially. The only thing that I think could mess that up a little bit is that if we have no races, then the Formula 1 teams will argue they've put all this money into this year's car and they're not going to be able to race. I think teams a little bit lower down the grid, Williams potentially, would like an extra year to work on 2021, potentially, considering the fact they're a team that have a lot to gain. But if there's a team like Renault that already have invested so much, perhaps they wouldn't be as kind to letting the 2021 regulations be pushed back a year because they feel they've already got an advantage. So it's going to be a really interesting political game. But if we get back to racing in May, like the FIA are hoping, if we get back to racing in August, like I am envisioning in my head, I think we will stick with these cars this year and move on to 2021. But as Formula One was saying at the weekend, it's a fluid situation. So in the reality, we don't know. But my gut feeling is 2021 will stay 2021 because there's been so much work into that already. And I think Formula One needs a bit of a refresh. I don't know. All depends on how many races we do this season. Question number 3 comes from Je suis Fudge Man. I really like that name. That gave me a good chuckle when I first saw that one. Is it more likely that the FIA will shuffle race weekends around towards the end of the year in order to fit more races in with the season, or will they drop Friday running, or will they do both? I kind of answered this in Tate's question last time round, but I wanted to elaborate a little bit more with this question from Je suis Fudge Man, because if we have more races at the end of the year, of course, a lot of the European season starts, well, from Zandvoort, from the 5th round, goes all the way through to September, the Italian Grand Prix. So there's a lot of wiggle room, especially through August where we have our summer break. So I think a lot of these races will be moved later on in the year, which is fantastic. And whilst I just said about Melbourne not being a circuit, you can suddenly say, we'll race in August, we'll race in September. Circuits like Zandvoort, where it's a purpose-built circuit, technically, if there's no other events going on, you can just suddenly show up there a little bit easier and go racing. So there's definitely more variability with what you can do with circuits like that. So I think we will see a lot of races shuffled more towards the end of the year. Will be interesting to see what effect that has on the 2021 calendar, whether that'll be pushed back a month or so. That'll be quite interesting. 2-day race weekends, I also think could be a possibility. It's something we spoke about last season, potentially going into the 2021 regulations. They're already getting rid of Thursdays. Teams are having to show up to the weekends later. So this is a really good testing ground if we do eventually go racing this year. A brilliant testing ground to see if a 2-day weekend works. So I'm all for that. And I think whilst it's not ideal, we may have 3 or maybe even 4 weekends in a row of racing, although that'd be amazing for us fans. Logistically, is that possible? With 2-day race weekends, possibly. So I will look forward to that if they do eventually go down that road. But it's a very tricky situation. I think it's an opportunity, and even if they do it for 1 race weekend, I definitely think it's an option worth exploring. And I definitely think for the fans, although if you're at the circuit, that will mean less running, and technically you're not getting as good value on your purchase for a race weekend ticket. And that could be something, if you've already got tickets, let's just say off the top of my head for Silverstone, and they do Silverstone, a 2-day race weekend, I think some people will be a little bit peed off with that situation. So that's something that they'll have to definitely announce early on and let people be aware of. Maybe even some kind of refund. Not too sure how they would quite do that. But from a fan's point, especially at home, these drivers, these teams are not going to have as much data. Racing is going to be a little bit more variable, and definitely more surprises are going to show up in the race. So it's not doom and gloom. It's an opportunity, I would say. And I would like to see them do it at least one event if we do start racing in July, August, and we're really trying to cram a calendar together. This mailbox is going to be a little bit longer than normal. Apologies, but I'm getting a lot of you at the moment. Probably won't mind the longer form videos. Actually, that's a quick question. Should I make these a little bit longer at the moment? Anyway, this is much more laid back today, folks. Question number 4 comes from Marcus Senzabaug. Definitely wrong. Definitely wrong. Apologies, but Marcus asks, so how do you think the postponement of the season will affect the driver market for 2021? This is a big talking point, and of course, silly season the big summer season where a lot of the driver transfers go on, is going to be postponed. I feel, and again, I cannot keep saying this, we really don't know what's going to happen this year. But right now, it's going to be a tricky situation for teams not only to swap drivers, but for teams to get rid of drivers. Contracts are so sticky in Formula 1. But again, money talks, cash is king, as the saying goes. Let's pick a driver like Max Verstappen. I think that's a good place to start. I'll pick out a few different drivers. So Max Verstappen, let's say for this example, there's 10 races this year. Would he like to move elsewhere? Well, in his contract, there is a clause, or there was last year, and I believe there still is this year, in his new deal he got at the beginning of the season. There's a clause, if Red Bull are not in the top 3 teams, he's allowed to move on. Now, will this season count as a full season? Will this year, if there's only 10 races, will that be able to get him out of the contract? Will that even count as a year of racing? Because a driver now, let's move on to Nicholas Latifi, let's say he's only got a 1-year deal, or Bottas even, because Bottas definitely does have a 1-year deal. Valtteri Bottas, who's each year at Mercedes given an extra year, 1 year, to try and prove himself. If he's only got 10 races, does that count as a full season? Because some drivers might be on contracts for a year, other drivers might be on contracts on a race-by-race basis. It's so difficult to tell. So again, if we have 15 races, I think ultimately there will be a few movers and shakers in the transfer market, because 2021 is going to be a year where teams a little bit lower down can make big gains, and ultimately all the teams need as good a driver lineups as they can. And if there's some dead weight on the grid, there might need to be some changes going on, especially if we've got a few Formula 2 races going on, and especially if we've got drivers like Nico Hülkenberg on the sidelines looking to come back in. So I think the effect at the moment is that if we have a good, strong season, there won't be much different, apart from the fact I think changes will happen a little bit later on, or teams will decide right now based on last year's performances. So a driver I think is going to be unique to watch is Kimi Räikkönen, who has already said this year, whilst he enjoys Formula 1, his focus is his family. That's where he wants to be. And as he said in Drive to Survive, Formula 1 is just a hobby. It's very likely he was probably going to retire at the end of this season. But if he's under contract for a year, will that mean, or at least another full season, will that mean he has to race in 21 as well? It's so tricky. So it's going to be a case-by-case basis. But I think, if we have a strong season, big, nice and long, 15 races, it won't have a huge effect on the year. And our final question, our audience participation question, comes from Thomas Johnson. A little bit different to our normal audience participation questions. It's about eSports. And you know what? Before what's going on at the moment happened, I didn't have a lot of interest in eSports. Whilst I enjoy playing the game, I didn't watch eSports. I don't find it particularly enjoyable. But as I always say, and I say it with Formula E, you don't know unless you give it a go. And also, one of the big things for me as well, I found with lots of different motorsport, if there's drivers I know, people I know, teams I know, I'm more likely to give it a bit more interest, a bit more time. So we've seen last weekend, we had the, apologies if I get these names wrong, but not the US, no, I've already got it wrong, not the Oz Grand Prix from Veloce, which was really cool. Had drivers like Stoffel Van Dorn, Esteban Gutierrez. We also saw content creators, Arava, Tiamat Marduk. I think I said that wrong as well. Not a good day today. Thibaut Courtois, Willen, a real mixed bag of characters. We saw plenty of guys from the esports scene as well. Daniel Beresne, Jarno Opmeer, I think are their names. I'm trying my best, folks. And we also saw the race do a similar kind of thing with the likes of Max Verstappen, Max Günther from Formula E, Antonio Felix da Costa from Formula E, Jimmy Broadbent, a YouTube creator. So having those people I could relate with, or at least know their backstory, was really fun. And seeing da Costa and Jimmy Broadbent go side by side was really, really cool. So, onto the question now. I'm avoiding it. Really sorry, Thomas. How influential can sim racing and esports be over the next few months, with some more F1 drivers trying their hand at it? Oh yeah, Lando Norris as well. Completely forgot. He was in the Veloce one. Oops. It's really cool. It's really cool. And I think at the moment, it's exactly what we need. It's just something to get our minds off what's going on. That's why I kind of think I might even potentially do a few light-hearted streams. Nowhere near as developed as those guys, but something maybe of an evening. Hop on, race some of you boys and girls, maybe do a bit of recording, who knows. I think whilst now, esports is a brilliant opportunity to prove its viability and why it should be the way forward. When Formula 1 comes back, I think it's going to have a real hard time keeping on to that audience, but I'd like to see them try. So far, we all know esports has been growing and growing in all aspects of the name at the moment, whether it's first-person shooters, FIFA games, racing games. I feel maybe over the last 12 months, it's become a little bit stuck, a little bit stagnated. But this is a big opportunity, not just in Formula 1, but in all different sports. And it's a great opportunity for them to capture a new audience. So if they can keep that going, if they can bring on board the likes of Lando Norris to do races of a weekend when he's not actually racing in Formula 1, I think that will bring an audience. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. Is it the future? It's not got me hooked just yet, but I'm going to be open to it and I'm going to let it try. So I'd love to know your thoughts on esports in the comments below. Again, a little bit more laid back today, not as heavily edited, although I don't do heavy editing anyway. Normally, I'm lazy like that. But I feel at the moment, just a nice long chat with you boys and girls is what I need, and hopefully this has given you something to do at the moment. But content will be slowly coming out. Maybe I'll get my first journey to F1 done by Friday. Let's have a think. So I'd love to know who you would like to see in this new series, whether it's current drivers, legends. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you've got a question for next week's episode, comments, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.